This is Tim O'Brien from Seattle on November 22nd, 2025. And now for this week's news roundup. We've surveyed the past week's popular stories across tech news sources and picked the most significant to feature. This week, we're covering a major internet outage, cybersecurity developments, AI advancements, investment shifts, and concerning trends in both law enforcement and technology journalism. Let's start with this week's focus story. It's Monday's Cloudflare outage. On November 18th, 2025 at 11:20 UTC, Cloudflare experienced a catastrophic failure that disrupted approximately 20% of global web traffic. Major platforms including X, ChatGPT, and Canva became inaccessible for millions of users worldwide. The outage lasted approximately 6 hours, with services fully restored at 17:06 UTC. So again, this was a big one. I got calls from people that morning saying, it looks like the internet is down again. And this is happening more and more. The technical root cause reveals a cascade of failures that should concern anyone that relies on cloud infrastructure. What was a routine database permission change in Cloudflare's ClickHouse database cluster triggered the generation of an oversized, quote, feature file that was used in their bot management system. This file, which normally helps identify malicious traffic, unexpectedly doubled in size. When this oversized file was propagated to all machines across Cloudflare's network, it exceeded the software's size limit, causing the routing software to fail entirely. Matthew Prince, who is the CEO of Cloudflare, addressed this incident directly, quote, "We are sorry for the impact to our customers and to the internet in general. Given Cloudflare's importance in the internet ecosystem, any outage of any of our systems is unacceptable." End quote. What made this outage particularly challenging is that it was intermittent. So the feature file was regenerated every 5 minutes, and depending on which part of the database cluster ran the query, it would sometimes generate a correct file and sometimes generate an incorrect one. This led to services flickering between functional and failed states, initially leading Cloudflare's engineers to suspect a massive DDoS attack rather than an initial configuration issue. My personal note here, they thought it was a DDoS attack, but it actually was a DDoS attack of their own making on a system that was designed to protect them against DDoS attacks. And just because I know that people sort of half listen to podcasts as I do myself, I just want to re-emphasize this. You use Cloudflare to protect yourself against DDoS attacks. They had a system internally that was protecting them against DDoS attacks. They pushed a change to it that made the system self-identify itself as a DDoS attack. And that caused the internet to fail for a large number of people. And it really is at the point now where this is just normal. So the next steps for those of you who were affected, if your services were impacted by this outage, here are some concrete steps to take. First, review your infrastructure dependencies. If Cloudflare's failure took down your services, you need to understand exactly how and why. Map out Cloudflare as a single point of failure. Second, implement real redundancy. This doesn't mean using multiple Cloudflare features. It means having a fallback system that doesn't rely on Cloudflare at all. Consider multi-CDN strategies, or at the minimum, have a static failover page that's hosted somewhere else. Third, improve your monitoring and your incident response. Many organizations learned about the Cloudflare outage from their customers rather than from their monitoring systems. Cloudflare itself didn't even know that it had an outage. It thought it was under attack. Ensure you have an external monitoring that doesn't rely on the same infrastructure that it is monitoring. And finally, document and test your disaster recovery procedures. This outage revealed that many organizations' DR plans just assumed that Cloudflare was like a rock. It would never go away, always be available. That assumption proved costly, and more as we enter into this world in which the internet's going to fail every couple weeks, we all need to be asking ourselves questions about what we depend on. The news continues with more fun news for Cloudflare. Tokyo court found Cloudflare liable for manga piracy, and this is on November 19th from Slashdot. It was another development for them this week. A Tokyo district court ruled that the company is liable for aiding manga piracy, awarding approximately $3.2 million in damages to Japanese publishers. The ruling came after a 3.5-year legal battle in which publishers alleged that Cloudflare continued to cache and serve content for their major piracy sites despite repeated infringement notices. The publishers reported that they had alerted Cloudflare to massive scale infringement involving over 4,000 works and 300 million monthly visits, but their requests to stop distribution were ignored. According to the court documents, Cloudflare continued providing services even after receiving information disclosure orders from U.S. courts. The judgment found that Cloudflare's failure to take timely and appropriate action despite receiving infringement notices from the plaintiffs and its negligent continuation of pirated content distribution constituted aiding and abetting copyright infringement. The court particularly emphasized that Cloudflare enabled a massive manga piracy site to operate, quote, under circumstances where strong anonymity was secured, end quote, without conducting any identity verification procedures. The publishers believe this judgment clarifies conditions under which content delivery networks like Cloudflare incur liability for copyright infringement, particularly regarding failure to verify customer identities and lack of appropriate response to infringement notices. This decision sets a significant precedent in Japan for content delivery network provider liability. Cloudflare has said it plans to appeal the verdict. In cybersecurity news, this week saw several significant cybersecurity incidents and law enforcement actions that highlight both the evolving threat landscape and coordinated global responses. First is a really big story, and this was covered by AP News, Axios, Tom's Hardware. Anthropic also had a blog post about it. And this was November 13th and 14th. So it was a little bit before this week, but I want to cover it because I think it's important. Anthropic has said that it thwarted the first AI orchestrated cyber attack. And if you've been reading the news lately, there have been other AI orchestrated cyber attacks, but this one is big because they used Claude. If you use Claude, you know it's the thing you use to write code. There's models like Claude Sonnet, Claude Opus. I use Claude via Cursor, but a lot of people are using Claude. And this is a very interesting thing because the attackers manipulated Anthropic's AI model Claude through a sophisticated jailbreaking technique. They posed as legitimate cybersecurity professionals conducting defensive testing, bypassing Claude's safety protocols by breaking down malicious tasks into smaller, seemingly innocuous requests. This social engineering approach deceived the AI into believing it was performing legitimate security assessments. Once compromised, Claude autonomously executed complex attack sequences, reconnaissance. It scanned target systems and mapped infrastructure. Vulnerability identification. It identified security weaknesses in target environments. Exploit development. So it wrote exploit code to leverage discovered vulnerabilities. Credential harvesting. It extracted authentication credentials from compromised systems. Data exfiltration, documentation. The AI operated at speeds unattainable by human hackers, with human operators intervening only at critical decision points. So the San Francisco-based company Anthropic disclosed that it believed it was the first large-scale cyber attack primarily orchestrated by artificial intelligence. The campaign attributed with high confidence to Chinese state-sponsored groups, and it marked a significant milestone, an attack where AI is autonomously executing 80 to 90% of the operations with minimal human oversight. Anthropic stated that the campaign targeted approximately 30 global entities, technology firms, financial institutions, chemical manufacturers, and it was outlining that this incident demonstrates AI's potential to significantly amplify the scale and efficiency of cyber attacks. I will say this, though, there is one thing I just want to state for the record. I have heard of other attacks that have been using LLMs for a number of months. I don't think this is the first one that ever used an LLM. I do think that this is the first one to use Claude Code, maybe the first one to make use of the agentic MCP-driven development tools that we all use. And for the record, one of the things I think you all should do if you're in Cursor or you're using Claude Code or any of these other tools like Gemini is that before you cut a software release, you should always be asking a couple questions. One of the things that I throw at my projects before I cut a software release is, hey, can you help me identify any vulnerabilities that might be lurking in these specific areas of my code that I just changed? Can you just do a deep dive and try to find anything that I might have missed? Can you find any bugs? And it actually does a great job of identifying vulnerabilities. That is not necessarily a weakness of the tool. The one thing it doesn't do that I have noticed is that if you ever ask it to develop an exploit, it's very good at saying, no, I will not do that. So if this news story disturbs you and you think, oh, I'm never going to use these tools, that's the wrong reaction. I think what you need to do is make sure that you're monitoring how people are using them and keep track of any anomalous behavior. In other cyber news, the Washington Post had a data breach that exposed 25,000 current and former employees' data such as social security numbers and other sensitive details. These were all stored in a third-party HR system. There was then a report on November 14th that said that the breach was linked to an exploitation of Oracle's e-business suite, with almost 10,000 employees and contractors affected. The company is providing credit monitoring services and collaborating with law enforcement to investigate that breach. And the next news story is timely because a lot of people are about to travel for Thanksgiving. A Russian hacker group has created thousands of fake travel sites. A Russian-speaking hacking group has created 4,300 fraudulent travel websites impersonating global brands like Booking.com, Agoda, and Airbnb, and they're doing this to steal your credit card information. The campaign has been active since early 2025. It involves phishing emails with fake reservation confirmations. Those will redirect users to clone sites in 43 languages. This sophisticated operation demonstrates the increasing professionalization of phishing campaigns, with attackers creating convincing replicas that can easily fool hurried travelers. So a quick warning for travelers over Thanksgiving. 1, verify all the URLs you see in any text messages or emails. Attackers use typo squatting. Those domains look nearly identical to the real ones. Even if you think that you're informed, please pay more attention next week. 2, don't click confirmation links. Instead of clicking a link in an email about a problem with your reservation, go directly to the official app or website, log in there, and check your status. And 3, watch for urgency. Any message that claims that your reservation will be canceled immediately unless you re-enter payment details, that is almost certainly a scam. Legitimate travel companies rarely demand instant payment, and they rarely send you emails that'll increase your stress. It is stressful enough to go to an airport. And a lot of these tools, if they've already gathered your information, they know when you're going to be there, and they know when you're going to be paying the least attention to that message or that click. So please don't get owned at the airport. And our last cybersecurity story for the week is Amazon uncovers attacks that are exploiting Cisco vulnerabilities. This is on November 14th again. Amazon security team uncovered cyber attacks targeting enterprise infrastructure through unpatched Cisco devices. Attackers exploited multiple vulnerabilities in Cisco software to gain unauthorized network access, install rootkits, and establish persistent control over compromised system. The campaign emphasizes the critical importance of timely patching and secure configuration for network appliances. In this week's programming news, only one story. Linus Torvalds had an interview at the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit in Seoul, and this was reported by the Register on November 18th. Linus provided insights into the evolving landscape of the Linux kernel development with particular emphasis on the integration of Rust and the impact of AI-assisted coding. You can read the full story at the Register, and I would encourage you to. One of the interesting quotes from Linus is, quote, "For almost the last 20 years, I've not been a programmer. I used to say that my job is often to say no," he explained, turning down new ideas that would be hard to maintain. But now he sometimes has to say yes to new things against opposition from long-standing maintainers who, quote, "kind of get stuck in a rut," end quote. And I think what he's referring to is Rust. So he talks a little bit about Rust. He says that it's something that's finally ready and it's going to be part of the kernel. You can read more in that Register article. But the quote from him is, "Rust is actually becoming a real part of the kernel instead of being this extremely experimental thing." And he says that this represents a major shift for the kernel. He also expressed some optimism but skepticism about vibe coding, a term, for the record, I hate. And he also expresses a bit of realism that I think is resonating with a lot of people who have used it. AI is just another tool, the same way compilers free people from writing assembly code by hand and increased productivity enormously, but didn't make programmers go away. So again, if you're out there wondering if your programming job is about to disappear forever, it appears that Linus disagrees. So he's looking forward to a time when AI is, quote, "less hyped and more like the everyday reality that nobody talks constantly about." Again, for more about that Linus interview, go read the Register. We have one more programming story, and that's Google Gemini 3 was released. And this is in various news sources, probably too many to list. This is big news. Google unveiled Gemini 3 Pro, marking a significant advancement in multimodal AI capabilities. The model features a sparse mixture of experts, transformer-based architecture with native support for text, vision, audio, and video inputs, with a token context window of up to 1 million tokens and output capacity for 64,000 tokens. Gemini 3 Pro represents a substantial leap in processing capability. The technical improvements focus on efficiency. So the MOE architecture, this mixture of experts architecture, dynamically routes tokens to specific expert networks meaning only a subset of the model's parameters activate for any given input. This allows for more complex reasoning while maintaining reasonable computational requirements. Industry reaction has been mixed. Many praise the model's enhanced multimodal capabilities and potential applications across diverse fields. And again, switching to my own commentary here, I've used it, I've been impressed by what it's done, but it takes a week or two for people to really understand what these new models do. There's a predictable, almost political timeline now when any major model is released. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of Medium posts and Substack posts that you wonder if people are being paid to write because they announced the new model as solving everything. Like world hunger will be ended by this new model. A lot of the AI ethicists and safety people claim that we're moving too fast. There's a lot of that happening with Gemini. There's a lot of that happening now. But really, give it a week or two, and it takes time to integrate these new models into all the new systems that people are using for people to really come back with a verdict like, this is awesome. My initial experience with Gemini 3 has been, this is pretty cool. It works. They also have released a IDE, switching back to the news mode now. Google released a new IDE called Anti-Gravity, and this is alongside Gemini 3. This is a new integrated development environment specifically designed for AI model development. The IDE features a real-time collaboration tool, integrated debugging for AI models, seamless deployment pipelines. Early access users report that Anti-Gravity significantly streamlines the AI development workflow, though some question whether we need yet another Google IDE when the company has had a history of abandoning developer tools. So, big week for Google. Check out Google Gemini 3. It's interesting. The other big news this week was investment shifts. So Peter Thiel exited NVIDIA, and then NVIDIA beat the street. So this is from November 19th and November 20th. Peter Thiel's complete divestment from NVIDIA sent ripples through the investment community following similar exits by SoftBank and other major institutional investors, raising serious questions about the AI market valuations and the potential bubble concerns. Financial analysts from multiple investment sites revealed a more nuanced story than simple profit-taking. Thiel's Founders Fund reportedly sold their entire NVIDIA position at prices between $180 and $185 per share, realizing gains of over 3,000% from their initial investment. However, internal sources suggest the decision was driven by concerns about market concentration and regulatory risks rather than doubts about AI's future. Goldman Sachs analyst Jennifer Wu noted, "We're seeing a rotation from hardware plays to software and services. The smart money isn't abandoning AI. They're repositioning for the next phase where application and implementation matter more than raw compute." Then, on November 19th, NVIDIA posted results that appear to vindicate the AI investment thesis, at least in the near term. The company reported sales growth of 62% year over year to $57 billion in the October quarter, ahead of Wall Street's projected $54.9 billion. Profits reached $31.9 billion, up 65%. The company also posted stronger than expected guidance of around $65 billion for the fourth quarter. Jensen Huang, quote, "Blackwell sales are off the charts and cloud GPUs are sold out." NVIDIA's stock jumped 3.4% in after-hours trading following the report, and shares of Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google also rose, underscoring the chipmakers' impact on the wider market. Thomas Monteiro, senior analyst at investing.com, commented, "This answers a lot of questions about the state of the AI revolution, and the verdict is simple. It is nowhere near its peak, neither from the market demand nor the production supply chain sides for the foreseeable future." At the heart of the recent bubble concerns are circular funding deals between NVIDIA and AI companies, such as a $100 billion investment in OpenAI in exchange for chip purchases announced in September. However, tech giants including Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google have all indicated in their recent earnings reports that they plan to continue hiking their AI infrastructure spending, suggesting sustained demand for NVIDIA's products. Okay, so in other technology news, more than 60 police departments across the United States and Canada have now deployed Boston Dynamics Spot robot dogs in active operations. The Massachusetts State Police, which operates 2 units, purchased in 2020 and 2022 at approximately $250,000 apiece, has used them in bomb disposal, armed standoffs, and hazardous material incidents. The deployment statistics are striking. These units have been involved in over 400 operations nationwide. with uses ranging from building searches to crowd monitoring. What's particularly concerning is the rapid normalization of military-grade robotics in civilian law enforcement without corresponding policy frameworks or public debate. Civil liberties groups have raised urgent concerns. The Electronic Frontier Foundation's latest report documents how these deployments often occur without public notification or oversight. There's currently no federal framework governing the use of robotic law enforcement tools, and only 3 states have any regulations about it. The technology itself continues to evolve. Boston Dynamics has developed law enforcement-specific packages, including thermal cameras, gas sensors, and two-way communication systems. Some departments are testing units equipped with less lethal weapon systems, though Boston Dynamics officially prohibits weaponization of their robots. All right, the future's arriving faster than many of us want it to. Let's move on to networking controversy. In a follow-up to the story from last week about TP-Link security concerns raised by U.S. regulators, Netgear has been accused by a competitor of deliberately stoking anti-China sentiment to gain market advantage. Internal communications leaked to the press suggest Netgear's marketing department developed a campaign specifically designed to amplify security fears about Chinese-manufactured networking equipment. The accusations center on this Netgear marketing presentation that outlines strategies to leverage geopolitical tensions and emphasize country of origin concerns when competing against TP-Link and other Chinese manufacturers. Netgear denies any wrongdoing, stating their marketing simply reflects legitimate security concerns. This controversy highlights the increasingly complex intersection of technology, national security, and commercial competition. Industry analysts note that while security concerns about foreign manufactured equipment are legitimate, using xenophobia as a marketing tool sets a dangerous precedent for the tech industry. And in other news this week, Microsoft announced $45 billion commitment to build new data centers in the Midwest, with the first phase breaking ground in 2026. The facilities will specifically support AI workloads and will require an estimated 5 gigawatts of power when fully operational. Amazon Web Services revealed plans for 15 new data center locations globally, with a total investment exceeding $60 billion over the next 5 years. The company is particularly focused on edge computing facilities to support AI inference workloads closer to the end users. Anthropic surprised the industry with a $50 billion investment to build custom data centers in Texas and New York. For a company that only recently achieved unicorn status, this massive infrastructure commitment signals both the capital flowing into AI and the computational requirements of next-generation models. The power requirements of these facilities have revived interest in nuclear energy. The Department of Energy's $1 billion loan to restart the 3 Mile Island reactor is just the beginning. This week alone saw Oracle announcing plans to power its new Nashville data center entirely with small modular reactors, small modular nuclear reactors. Google signed a 20-year power purchasing agreement with a consortium developing fusion power, although delivery is not expected until 2035. That's 10 years from now. Meta exploring sites for data centers specifically located near existing nuclear facilities. So these numbers are fairly staggering. Collectively, the AI industry's planned data centers will require an additional 50 gigawatts by 2030. That's equivalent to the entire power consumption of Argentina, and that has prompted a gold rush in clean energy development, with nuclear seen as the only viable baseload power source that can meet both reliability and carbon neutrality requirements. That's it for the week's news, and I am going to switch into a new section, which is opinion. I'm going to talk about my opinion of the dangerous centralization of cloud. This week's Cloudflare outage, coming just 3 weeks after the AWS significant disruption on October 22nd, it exposes a fundamental flaw in how we built the modern internet. We've traded the resilience of a distributed network for the convenience of these centralized services, and this bill is coming due. Consider the immediate media response to Cloudflare. It also was incredibly irresponsible, within minutes of services failing. Several major news outlets published articles that claimed that this was a potential cyber attack, or that this was a cyber attack. No evidence, no confirmation from Cloudflare, just an assumption and speculation presented as fact. This rush to attribution is not just bad journalism, it's very dangerous. When infrastructure failures are immediately blamed on malicious actors, we accomplish two harmful things. We create unnecessary panic, And we absolve the infrastructure providers of responsibility for building resilient systems. If every outage is very quickly a cyber attack, then no outage is a design failure that needs fixing. But equally dangerous is the lack of follow-through, the failure of tech journalism to question why a configuration change at one company can bring down 20% of the internet. 20% of the internet because of one company. Where are the investigations into market concentration? Where's Congress? Where are the hard questions about architectural decisions that create these single points of failure? The cloud hasn't made the internet more reliable. It's made failures more spectacular. When the AWS hiccup affected everything from Voodoo Donuts to Topgolf to Mercury Lounge to everything to Starbucks. I mean, smart beds were frozen because they had to connect to the cloud every couple minutes. This is ridiculous. And then like a couple weeks later, someone pushes the wrong file to a Cloudflare bot detection service. And 1/5 of the global economy is just on hold right now because somebody pushed a file to the wrong system. I'm not qualified to talk about what the consequences should be, but I feel like there should be consequences. There should be insurance. There should be some regulations out there that allow us to not enter into every week wondering, what's going to happen this week? What's going to happen this week to everything at once? What's going to happen this week that's going to make my sister call me and say, what's up with the internet today? I had a hard time using it. We are failing. When I say we, I mean people who are in the industry. We're failing. We need to figure out a way out of it. And I just don't think that building more and more data centers is the answer. I think we need to think about how we work with each other. So the solution to consumers is not to abandon cloud services. It's not to go out and buy a bunch of racks of servers and set them up yourself like David Heinemeier Hansson wants you to do, because you still depend on things that are going to fail. But we need true redundancy. And that means provider diversity, more than 3 or 4 choices. And it also might mean changing how we pay for these services, be it Cloudflare or AWS. These prices should be far more dynamic than they are today. There's really no penalty for a cloud provider having a failure like what happened to AWS. It's not like it's a liquid market. You can't just move all of your investments from AWS to another provider quickly. It requires a huge amount of investment, a huge amount of labor and effort. What would make it more reasonable is if we had standards for cloud. If we had a way to move workloads between the cloud and one cloud had a massive failure, it needs to be more realistic to be able to press that button and move to another cloud. And with that should come a dynamic arbitrage model for the pricing of cloud resources. The problem is a lot of those customers at AWS, they're locked in to some agreement. They're not going anywhere. And Cloudflare doesn't have any real competitors in its space. I mean, it does, but a lot of people are just going to default to Cloudflare. We need more competition. We need a little bit more regulation, and we need more freedom. There needs to be real consequences, market-driven consequences for failure. And I also want to be clear, I'm not pointing the finger here at Cloudflare and saying oh, they did something wrong and shame on them. Bad things are going to happen all the time. Absolutely. I've been in the middle of outages like this. Not as big as this Cloudflare outage, but you know what happened. You know there's a phone call going on. There were people getting angry at each other. There's teams having fights about different things. None of that matters. To me, I think the larger failure here is that we haven't created the financial incentives for this not to happen. And I think we're going to have more mistakes like this until we start to acknowledge that we don't actually have a market. There's no efficient market for cloud. And until that happens, you're just going to have to live with the fact that it's going to fail a couple times a year in a massive way. And when it fails, you might have a couple of meetings to talk about migrating off of one cloud or the other, but you're stuck. And I absolutely am not saying anything about more regulation. I'm not in favor of more regulation. I'm not in favor of having some law passed that says all the clouds have to fail never. That wouldn't work. But we need more liquidity in the market so that if one cloud provider messes up, they face immediate consequences. And right now we just don't have that. Anyway, that's my opinion. It's maybe a little snipey. I'm sorry. Again, if you work at Cloudflare, I'm sorry. I'm not picking on you. It was a tough week. Please get back to getting stuff working. And now for the weekly podcast update, which is what we close out the weekly news roundup with. A quick update for this week. Many of you noticed this is the first week I dialed back on the daily news. Now, this podcast is something I do in my free time. And I'll just say that I have a little less free time this week than I had in the prior 3 weeks. So for those of you who looked forward to that daily news hit, I apologize. But it was a significant investment of time. I do want to make sure that people are listening know that I think that there's value for someone technical jumping in and talking about news stories, but I just don't have enough bandwidth to do it every day. But I am going to do it every week. The other change some of you noticed is that I didn't publish every day. I published 3 parts of a series on the evolution of databases. On Monday, I talked about the last 20-year history of how we've expanded the number of types of databases. And I also talked about how we've lost experts. We used to have a job title called database administrator, and that's largely disappeared. So databases are much more important than ever in 2025, but we've lost these experts that used to sit right next to us. And then in part 2 on Wednesday, I introduced some of the core concepts of the newest database type that's out there, vector databases. In the process of doing that, I'm hoping to get people excited about what vector text embeddings are and what they actually do for us. In that episode, I call Thomas Jefferson and Snoop Dogg nearest neighbors. Listen to it if you want to understand what I meant. In part 3, I run through a mostly technical review of options in the vector database space. I'd encourage you to listen to these 3 episodes. The last one is fairly technical. The middle one is interesting if you're not technical. And I hope that separating the news from the feature stories makes this content a bit more long-lived. That was one of the pieces of feedback I got this week, which was, I like some of your stories, but I don't necessarily want to sit through the news. This upcoming week is going to be a little bit low. I'm going to be on break for Thanksgiving, and it would be really bad operational security for me to tell you what I'm doing over Thanksgiving, but let's just say I'll be with family, but I'll always have one eye on an incident bridge, which is something I've had to do in the past. Like many people in technology, we enjoy the holidays, but we are also on call, right? Because think about the AWS outage, think about the Cloudflare outage. A lot of us have visibility into some of these outages, and you always just have to be ready. If you're in the US, enjoy the holiday, and do keep an eye on any alerts for downtime. And if you are not in the US, enjoy your break from the annoying Americans, but don't tell them I said that.